All right, so at the end of the last video, I said that the next one I was going to start with the inventory itself. But as I was looking at some stuff before recording, I decided that really the best path forward is not to go straight to the inventory, but to start some of the UI work. Because if we do start the inventory now, we won't have any way to really see anything. So by having some of the UI in place, especially like the interaction widget that, when you aim at something, if it's a pickup, it'll tell you like the quantity and the item name and all. That'll just make everything easier to, visually verify that the inventory works well. But before I get started on that, I wanted to address a couple of different things that I've just kind of seen in between making the videos and wanted to refine. So the first thing, and one of the I think it was in the beginning of the interaction interface video, I talked about using bracket initialization for variables. So as you see here, I'm not making a vector and then saying this vector equals get pawn view location. I'm initializing the variable with these brackets. And I kind of talked about how it's like more efficient, but I wanted to be able to show the real like documentation backed reasoning for that. And so here on Stack Overflow, I found this. This is the answer where I first learned about it, and it's got some really good examples. But basically, you can see this guy, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his name because I know I'll butcher it, but this is the creator of C++, and so they're basically taking this info directly out of his book that he wrote. When you initialize things with the brackets, and I think I did touch on this, but it makes it extremely type safe because it guarantees that the type you're using is going to get initialized correctly. So if we look at these examples, right, they're bringing in two arguments to this function, a double and an int. So they make an int and they try to set it to the double, right, with the equal sign like you normally would. If it is a, say it was 7.9 like they show here, well, because of the way that, it's being casted to an integer, it's going to lose all that precision. So you're going to lose 0.9 of your value and it'll just become 7. Likewise, if you have a char which is only 1 byte, and then you try to set it to an integer, then what's going to happen is it's going to drop off a lot of the precision on that because an integer is 4 bytes, and so you're going to go down to just 1. So I don't know the math off the top of my head on this. Actually, I would assume maybe what it's doing is because 5 is 1 0. What is it? 0 1 0 1. So you're essentially cutting everything above until it would just have a 0 1. And so that's why I think, just off the top of my head, I'm not going to bust out the hex calculator for this, but I think that what they're saying here is, it would become 1 because it's cutting off 3 bytes to make it into a char. So obviously that is a very bad, thing to happen. But now, so say they're creating another int, same as the first example, but now we use the brackets, right? So it's going to throw an error and tell you, hey, you shouldn't do this because it's going to truncate your decimal. Same thing with the char now, narrowing, right? Which is like it's losing bytes. And so okay, so when something fits, so like not another char but 24, then it's like, okay, yeah, that's fine, you can do that because it can fit 1 hex value, it can fit that. And then again, I don't need to read every single thing verbatim, but basically what this is showing is that is why bracket initialization is good. It basically keeps everything type safe for you and avoids any of these little subtle kind of issues that might come up. And so I also found this interesting. He says the only situation where an equal sign is preferred is when using auto to get the type determined by the initializer. And so he shows this down here that, you know, it'll automatically determine it for you. I am still a little leery of using auto personally, just because I don't like. This is why I don't like Blueprint. I don't like it when code does stuff for me. So it's, you know, personal preference, I guess. All right, so that was just I just wanted to address that. So to the code changes now. A couple things when I created the item base class, I noticed. So I am using like a reference, which is another game project I've been working on, and I've mentioned it a few times. Is that when I was doing that, I kind of like put some things in, thinking, okay, maybe I want to use Blueprint with this or something, and I ended up never using it. Well. I kind of didn't realize it at the time, but I did a little bit of that, made a few mistakes here in the item base header. So for one, I talked about this meta specifier, and it is good to know about this. It's useful especially if you want to set values in the editor, but we're never going to have a case where we want to set the quantity, this quantity anyway. We're going to want to set it on the pickup, so maybe we'll use this again on the pickup class, but for the item base class, this is more of the data class that will be stored into the inventory array. We don't need this meta specifier at all for the quantity. There will never be a time where we use a slider to set this value. The other thing is I noticed that I left a lot of these as edit anywhere. It doesn't really hurt anything, but I'm going to go ahead and fix all of this to be visible anywhere, because again, never will have a need or a chance to edit this stuff in the editor itself. So it's better to just have it as visible. This way, you know, you could expand the character's inventory in the editor and look at it. Then you would see this stuff, but you have no need to ever edit it in the editor. And so just making things consistent and logical. You know, it was kind of weird. One thing visible, the rest edit. And then another thing, this is more minor, but all these functions here, I copied this directly from the item data struct because it is, you know, the same stuff, but I'm going to go ahead and make all these consistent as well. So we're in the item base class, and so instead of item data, I'm going to just take this to where, you know, delete this back to where it's all just item, because that's more in line with the name of the class. Okay, so that's it. Everything's looking consistent now on all of our data. Down here in the the overload operator, double equals, I just wanted to use this pointer for ID. This is another just kind of minor nitpick, but anytime there's a lot of instanced data going around, so there could be, you could potentially have hundreds or thousands of item base class in your world. You always want to be very explicit with basically using data between the instances, right? And so this is saying, this pointer is making it very clear here that we're taking the ID from this item class we're in and another ID from another, item class. So again, just a minor refinement, but something that is just keeping things clean and efficient for later. I talked about in the last video, in the interaction video, about when I was copying this part here, I was like, does this really make sense? Because if we have our trace end being set to the interaction distance, why do we need to do a check? Why do we need to calculate a distance and check that it's inside of this, right? Because the trace will never hit anything that's outside of interaction check distance. And so I did some testing, and sure enough, it doesn't seem to affect anything. This is very easy to add back in if somehow it does end up being something important, but I don't think it is. So go ahead and delete distance and delete this and this check here. And you know, like I said, if somehow it pops up again, it's easy to add back, but I don't think it will. One last thing before I get started on the actual content of this video is in the interaction interface, all the functions here, they're not doing anything. But let's say, what if we want to be able to have the thing we're interacting with know about the character? In that case, you can easily pass arguments along with these interface functions. And so that's what we're going to do on interact. It is what did I call it? A CS tutorial character for me, player character. So give interact an argument there, and then make sure that you copy that and put it into the CPP so that it matches the declaration. And see, now when you do that though, now we need to go and make sure that we use that argument. So go down into the characters interact right here, and where we're calling interact, just pass this pointer, because that way, see, for writer it pops up and it tells me, okay, you're gonna pass along the character who's doing the interaction. That'll be really useful later on in some of the other classes that we make. Okay, so I think with that, it's time to get started on making some UI elements. And so I'm going to open up the editor and make a few new classes. Okay, so back in the editor, and I had to tweak a few things before I could build successfully. The main thing was, when you modify this, the interaction interface doesn't know what the character class is. So I went up to the top here and put a forward declaration. This is just a way to let it know, hey, this is a class, so you can use this type, and then this is kind of telling the compiler that this will be defined elsewhere. So then in the CPP file, that's where you put the include to the header, and then make sure this matches here. It also then, once this changed, I forgot to change it in the interface test actor, and we're still going to use him for the testing out the interaction widget. So make sure you update it over there as well. Okay, so now back in the editor, all we're really going to do right this minute is, no, I guess we go ahead and we can go ahead and build the widgets. We'll make the classes, and then we'll go ahead and build the widgets too. All right, so we're going to go C++ classes. We're going to create a new class, go to all classes, and so we want a user widget. It's this one right here. And this is just called interaction widget. For the location, I'm going to put it in a new folder, user interface. And inside of this, I'm making a subfolder just called interaction. We're about to make some widgets in this as well, so go ahead and make another subfolder called inventory if you are using this same folder structure as me. This just keeps it, nice and organized. So interaction widget goes in interaction. Make sure everything looks good here. It is a user widget. All right, and so that one finished successfully, and so now I'm gonna go create another one. And the next one is going to be another user widget. And I'm going to call this one the inventory panel. I'm going to put it in the inventory folder. Make sure everything looks good. Make sure you don't typo the name. All right. All right, and so the last one, well, actually, there's two more. So the inventory panel isn't going to be the only thing that we're using when we like open the menu. You know, you would want to nest that in like a menu widget. And then later, you know, you could have like an equipment slot in there or like a quest log or something like that. So the inventory panel is, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a menu widget. Again, another user widget. And this one I'm going to call main menu. And so it's basically, think of it like, you know, you're playing the game, you push start, it's going to open up, and then you have like tabs or, you know, something like that. You can hit like the bumper buttons like LB, RB on your Xbox controller to switch between different panels. That's what I envision, you know, the main menu would be. And so the inventory panel is going to be nested in that. So this one I'm going to just put on the top level of the user interface because it's kind of general. You know, it doesn't really apply to either one of these. So I'm going to put that right there in user interface, main menu. All right, so main menu added successfully. And now the last thing we want to make is the HUD. So in Unreal, there is an actual built-in class that is specifically called the HUD class. I don't know, here it is right here. Okay, so it's on the common page. So this is a great place to obviously control all of your user, you know, your user interface. It has some nice functionality that kind of helps. It's got, you can see here in the description, it's got a few things. It's like, it's got a default canvas, a debug canvas. It lets you render debug text. And it's got some, you know, some nice stuff like that, but it also is just a nice logical place to group all the user interface. And so we're actually going to create a HUD. And what's a good name for this? I'll just call it tutorial. I'll just call it, since the character is CS tutorial, it'll just be CS tutorial HUD. And now this one, I'm going to put, let's see. It's kind of framework, but it's really like the root of the user interface, so it can go in user interface. It'll just sit there alongside a main menu. Everything looks good here. Create. All right, so at this point, you should have 4 widgets created in C++. We should have the interaction widget, which is the next main focus, the inventory panel, the main menu, and the HUD. So setting up all the widget kind of relationships and building up, even building up the visual part, it's a little bit tedious. So this whole next section is going to be a bit of a slog, but just bear with me. I'm trying to keep this as unedited as possible for people who might not have done this before, and so it gets a little bit faster when once you're familiar with it. But at the beginning, it's just going to be a little bit, it's going to be a little repetitive and stuff like that. We got to build up the C++ relationships, and then we got to go make sure that we have the matching widget, the visuals. So I'm going to close the editor for now because we're going to focus on the C++ side. All right. So the HUD is like the controller for all of our UI elements. So the first thing we want to do is start by putting in the code that's going to create the other widgets. Because just like when you create with everything, when you create, like, say if we go here to the character and we look at the constructor, how they're doing, create default subobject on the different, like the camera and the spring arm, the widgets have to be created at some point and attached to something. And so that's why, I always recommend using the HUD for that, is because it's kind of the perfect place to spawn the widgets. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a couple of T subclass of user widget, and this one's going to be the main menu class. Now you can, so T subclass of, I made a typo. It is not, only the S and the O are capitalized, the C is not. T subclass of, if you're not familiar with that, what that is it's basically it's a way to enforce types in the editor. And so that, when we make this a U property and go into the editor, there'll be a drop down where we need to select the visual component of the widget. And because we're setting it here to user widget, anything in our project that's a user widget will show up in that list. So what's better to do is declare it as a subclass of your main menu class. So U main menu, and then I'm going to add a for declaration here. And Writer does it for me automatically, but you can just type it up here. This is basically, I've kind of mentioned it a little bit before in the other videos, but this just basically tells it the type. It's saying, okay, this is a class, so you can understand what it is here. And then when we're using it in the CPP file, we'll actually include the header to get the definition of it. So that's kind of it's just a nice way to avoid having to include a whole bunch of headers for everything you want to use in your header. So the second one is going to be T subclass of U interaction widget. For declaration again, interaction widget class. So now I'm calling these main menu class and interaction widget class because this will only hold the visual component of this widget in the editor. So it's basically, I don't know any other way to do it. You can't create these like you can other classes because the visual aspect is purely stored in the editor. So you have to have a way to set that in the editor. I'll talk about that more here in just a second when we go to create them. These should be U properties, edit defaults only, widgets. All right, so we have those two. I'm gonna create a Boolean is menu visible. Can be used for things down the line when you're checking for, specifically what this one's used for is, so what I use it for was like aiming, like, okay, if I'm in aim mode and then I toggle the menu on, I don't want to maintain that. So when B menu is visible goes true, I told the character to stop aiming. What we're going to use it for is later on when you have the like lootable containers. If if the menu is visible and you go to loot a container, it should just bring up the container and not do anything else, like not turn off the menu. So it's just a nice little control variable there. I'm going to add a protected section, and I'm going to go and I'm going to get my nice little bars here that I like to use. Take my properties and variables up here. Okay. So we're going to make a tutorial HUD constructor. We want a display menu function, hide menu. We want show interaction widget. This is what other classes are going to call, specifically the character class, when you go to look at a widget. Hide interaction widget. And then update interaction widget. And this one's important because this will have the interactable data. We're going to take this in by reference, so it's taking it in. It says by pointer here, but when we give it the address, then the pointer holds That way we're not having to copy the interactable data every time we want to update the widget. We just take whatever the target interactable has and pass it in by its reference here. Okay, and so up here, like I mentioned, this is where we get the class for the purpose of construction. Now down here in the protected section, we're going to have the actual widget reference itself. And so main menu widget, and another uProperty, interaction widget. All right, and then the other function we need is going to be begin play. So I'm going to generate overriding members, begin play, and this I'm going to move it down functions. Get some space here. Okay, this looks good. I'm going to generate all my functions. I want everything. And let's move begin play up there. Okay, so now when I talked about constructing those widgets, so this is where we're going to actually do that. So what you need to do, first verify that the class is not null, because if it is, and then you try to create it, obviously it's going to crash the editor, or crash your game. So it's got some errors here. The reason is because we need to include user interface main menu. Now the way you create a widget is main menu widget, create widget, and its type uMain menu. You pass in the first argument as the world, the game world instance, and then the second one is the class, and that's where we use a main menu class. Now later when we create different classes that only need a C++ element, you'll see something kind of like this, static class. So the reason why this will fail for a widget is because, like I said, half of the widget is the graphical element, and that only exists in the editor. So that is why we have to make these uProperties, and we have to set them in the editor on the HUD blueprint so that it can properly, the widget we're going to make uses the main menu as its parent class. So this is still going to be a valid version of the main menu class. The difference is between the static class, which only gets the C++ side, and the one that's set in the editor is that the one in the editor is also linked to the graphical elements. And so that is why, later when we do pickups, since a pickup, gets all of its info from the data table, it gets all of its stuff, like it's initialized purely from data, not from the editor, you can use static class over there. But for widgets, you have to do it this way. So now, once we assume the widget has been created right here, now we would do add to viewport, but we're not going to leave it right there. We're going to set its visibility. And it's an enum, it's E slate visibility, and you can see the options here. We're going to set it to collapsed. So collapsed and hidden are very similar. I don't know why the engine has both of them. The main difference that I've learned over time between the two is that collapsed is actually better for performance because it hides it and it doesn't do, there's a thing called, I think it's called pre-pass and then post-pass for widget rendering. If you set something to hidden, it still does all those different render passes. Whereas on the collapsed, when it's collapsed, it doesn't do the pre-pass. I'll try to find the documentation where I found that later. But the main thing that I've started using collapsed instead of hidden for is that it supposedly has a little bit better performance. And so every little bit counts. All right, so this is really the format for creating these widgets. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to get my interaction widget and replace this stuff and replace this with interaction widget class. And again, it's upset because we need to include it. So user interface, interaction widget. Oh yeah, of course. Getting a little bit hasty there. I'm not setting an interaction widget class. I'm trying to create an interaction widget. So that would be the issue. Oops. Okay, leave these as class. Okay. So now we've created these and they're there and they are invisible. Now you can start building up the functions to be called by player input to show and hide them. Now, one thing I learned this through trial and error later on. The interaction widget is technically going to be full screen. You can't just you can put widgets at arbitrary places on the screen, but it's difficult and requires a lot more than using a full canvas panel with an anchor towards, like, you know, we're going to put it at the bottom. The canvas panel is not rendered. It's purely used for this purpose, anchoring different things to points on the screen. And so because of that, we want to, if you look at add to viewport, it's got the argument here is Z order, which is the order in the Z as it relates to your screen, further away from your eyes or closer to your eyes. The higher the number, the more on top this widget will be. So when we open the menu, if the menu is below the interaction widget, you won't be able to click on the menu because the mouse still knows, like the mouse clicks still check what widget is under them. So the main thing about it is, you know, I'm just gonna pick kind of some arbitrary numbers here. I'm going to do a 5 for the main menu, but I'm going to do a -1 for the interaction widget. This way we can always know that, you know, if we need to put some stuff underneath, there's still space. Obviously you can come back and reorder these later. But the main thing about this is now, if we have the menu open, you're still going to be able to move the view around and say you look at a new interactable, you look at the interactable, and then you wanted to do something in your inventory. Well, if this was on top, it would block you, and now your inventory is unusable till you look away from an interactable. Doing a Z order of -1 or just anything below the main menu, that ensures that even when the menu's open and you look at interactables, you don't notice any functionality changing. Okay, so now we've got some basic. We got the widgets created, we got them added to the viewport. They don't have any graphical element yet. We're going to go into the editor and build that up. But for right now, we can fill out a little bit in these functions here. So for display menu, we just want to do a check. It's always good just to make sure, you know, if say something is calling this and we forgot to set somehow if we forgot to set this in the editor and we tried to call this, and you know that would be a crash. So B is menu visible. We want to set that to true, and then we do main menu widget, set visibility to visible. Really simple. Hide, same thing but now in reverse. Collapsed. Interaction widget, it's going to be the exact same thing, except we don't need to set a Boolean. So I'm just going to copy paste this code and change it to interaction widget. Get rid of my Boolean there. Okay. Now for the update of the interaction widget, if we have an interaction widget, if it's not null, And if the interaction widget, we do get visibility is equal to collapsed, then I'm going to set it to visible. And then, regardless of whether or not this runs, we're going to call update widget. Now this does not exist yet. It's going to take in the interactable data argument to this interactable data, which is this guy. So let's go ahead and comment this out for now. This is more going to be a placeholder reminder. And basically what this is when you aim at a new interactable and we are trying to update the widget, if it's collapsed and we're trying to update the widget, we might as well show it. So that's why this by default just shows it, but we still have a separate function here for if there's other use cases of showing the widget. So this isn't really crucial. You can take this out and then replace anytime you would call this, just call this alongside of it. So either way, it's up to you if you like this. I just figured, if I'm aiming at a new interactable, I'm calling this function and I might as well show the widget. Okay, so that's it for the HUD for now. Nothing too crazy yet. It'll get more complicated later when we need to do like the looting a container and stuff, because it gets a little tricky showing that widget, the loot widget. So I'm going to go to the main menu now. So then the only stuff we really need to set up in the main menu class for now is, and this will make a lot more sense once I actually start building it on the screen, but the main menu we know is going to take up everything on the screen when it is open, even though, it'll have transparent parts, but and then it'll have the inventory. Now, if you drag an item out of the inventory and you drop it, what to you feels like you're dropping it in the world, but you're actually dropping it onto the main menu widget, then we want to be able to call the drop item function. And so that's what we're going to put in here for right now. We're just going to put in a little bit of supporting code to as a placeholder for that. So we need a U property, and this is going to be a character reference, player character, because the drop item function is something on the player character that links to his inventory. And I think other than that, I think we just need to override a few functions. So I will go to override, and I want native on initialized. Native construct, and then I want native on drop. Now these two are kind of used for like, as construction for constructors, which is like, it's kind of named poorly. This one I usually view as like the widget constructor. I think it runs first. Then you have this one. Now the drop is going to be used to, it's pretty self-explanatory. When the widget detects a drop action, then it will call this, and that's where we would access the player character and say drop item. So now I'm just going to override generate the definitions for everything. Now we can leave native on initialize empty for now. That'll be used later. For the native construct, we're going to do player character equals what happened to me here? Hitting all kinds of keys. CS tutorials character get owning player pawn. So basically, because the HUD is associated with a player, controller, and a player, that means that any widget that is attached to the HUD will be able to gain a reference to that player. And so when we call this get owning player pawn, it's going to go up the chain and look for the owner, which would be our character, and then it can get a reference to it. So that works out really nicely. That's another reason why I like using the HUD is because, you can access things in like a hierarchical fashion to get your player reference. Now what we would do here, we don't have our item, we're going to create a special operation it's a subclass of this right here, this U drag drop operation. It can hold data. When you like click and drag the mouse, it can like take what's called a payload, in which case, it would be an item and all this stuff. Then when you drop it onto the main menu, we would cast that to whatever item and then use our player character to drop it. We don't have any of that right now, so that's why I said this was kind of just going to be placeholder stuff for the future. And so we'll leave this. I'll just put a little bit of pseudocode here. It will say, cast operation to item drag drop, ensure player is valid, call drop item on player. So yeah, pretty easy. But again, we're going to build all that up when we start building all the different inventory and item related functions. Okay, now to the interaction widget. So for the interaction widget, it's very simple for now. I haven't built up a lot of crazy stuff into it. You could obviously do whatever you want. For me, it is purely text right now. It's just a little background and then a couple pieces of text. So with that, I do want to get another player reference. So I'm going to say uProperty, visible anywhere. Player reference. It is a tutorial character. Player reference. And then we will have a function called update widget, which, as you saw, it's the same way as the one on the HUD. So this is updating the interaction widget. We're going to take in the same thing, interactable data, not inventory. And then we're going to use the text contained in this to update all our different text blocks. So I'm not really narrating when I'm doing these forward declares here, but again, you forward declare most things the same exact way. You just put it outside the class somewhere in this file so that the compiler sees this and knows it's a type that will be defined elsewhere. Okay, now everything else doesn't need to be accessed from outside the class. So really the only thing we call here from outside is update widget. So everything else can be protected. So what we're going to make is uTextBlock is the name for the text that you drag in and build in the widget editor. And we're going to have a couple different things here. So I'm going to need to add a forward declare for this. So obviously we need name, we need action, we need quantity, and this is from when we start looking at items that are laying on the ground in the form of a pickup class. We need the key press text. So this is for if you come up on an interactable that has a delay, it will say hold instead of press. So we can actually update that. And then we have a progress bar, which is going to also be used for timed interactables. Forward declare it. We then have a current interaction duration. And all of the, these three here are really for the timed interactions. All right, let's add the properties, the uProperty specifiers. So I'm gonna make these visible anywhere. This is crucial, bind widget. So this, I have an entire separate tutorial dedicated just to this concept. Using this meta keyword, what it will do is when we go to create the graphical elements for this widget, if that graphical part of the widget does not include a text block with this exact variable name, you will get a compiler error on the editor. So this is how they link. This is how we can edit this data in C++, and then we will see the updates reflected on the graphical side on the widget. So it's really important. I'm going to copy what I have up here. And this will be in the interactable data category. Basically, all of them are going to have this exact same thing. And that's it. Now, for functions, we're going to need a couple. We're going to need a function that returns a float, and it's going to be called update interaction progress. We use this we bind this to our interaction progress bar, and this is how this function is called, and it returns a float. This is how the progress bar knows how much to fill up. Then again, we need to override a couple of functions from the parent class: native on initialized and native construct. We need to make this one a U function because it's going to be bound. Just call it category interaction. I guess it doesn't hurt. It can have the same thing. Functions and properties don't, they're not they don't reside in the same place in the editor, so it doesn't really matter if you have these all in the same category. The functions are down like on the left panel, whereas these guys are in the right panel in the details. But it's fine, doesn't hurt, just makes it look more consistent in here. All right, so let me go ahead and implement. Okay, let me sort some of this out. So I want these at the top. And everything else should be fine. Oh yeah, no return statement. Just put this for now so that it's not upset. Okay. So the very first thing we want to do, we want to bind the progress bar to the update interaction progress function. Now, we have the same issue as always. We're missing the include. So for any UMG widget building blocks, texts, progress bars, any of that stuff, you will find it in the folder called components. Progressbar.h is for that one. %delegate. And so you'll see here, let's see. %delegate, if I mouse back over it, it says a bindable delegate to allow logic to drive the text. So wording's a little bit confusing, but what we're going to look for is bind U function. Now this takes an object and a name. So the object is this class, and the name is update interaction progress. This is it's a weird syntax because usually you don't type in the name as like a string, but occasionally you will find bindings for delegates where you have to do that, and so this is one of them. Now for the construct, we're going to set our key press text default, and let me include components. Text block. We want to set our text to, it needs to be an f text, so we'll say f text from string, and by default it's going to say press. If we want to update it, we'll do so in one of the the cases, which I'm going to build here in just a second. Set our current interaction duration to 0.0. Okay, so now here's the most important function. Update widget. Update widget, because we built in, if we go look at the definition here, we built in the type of interactable to the interaction data. Knowing that, we can do a switch statement on interactable data dot type and take action accordingly to update the widget. Now it's upset, it's like, hey, there's no default case, you don't have all your cases here. Again, writer is awesome because I can say generate missing case statements, bam. That saved about 4 minutes of typing. Now I still have to organize them because nobody puts their case statements all bundled up like that, but still it's pretty nice. Okay, so I've got all my cases that are ready to be handled, and for right now we don't have an NPC, we don't have NPCs, we don't have the device class, we don't have the toggle class or the container. The only thing we're going to be having in the near term future is the pickup. So for that, we're going to put in a couple of different pieces of stuff here. So for one, we're going to reset the key press text to press. This is just in case, say you've looked at a timed, like a door or something that was timed, it gets set to hold, and then you look back. Because remember, there is one interactable widget. We're not creating multiple widgets for everything that we're interacting with. I've seen implementations of other, people's games where they tie a new widget to every interactable and make it pop up. But I thought it would be more efficient and more sensible to have the interaction widget reside in the HUD, and then you take the data from everything you're aiming at in order to update it. So that is why, we always need to make sure we handle every case of, okay, hey, what was this set to before I looked at this new thing? So we're going to make sure we set our interaction, our key press text back to press. We're going to take the interaction progress bar. We're going to set its visibility to collapsed. Now the reason for this, oh my gosh, it's freaking out. The reason for this is just my personal philosophy. I don't believe that a widget should ever have a reason to be timed to pick it up. Okay, maybe if it was something that weighs like a ton, but at that point, like, you really should be adding some custom animations. Like, you need to build some extra logic for that. Don't just make it have a timed bar that fills up when you got to pick up your heavy item. So me personally, I decided to completely do away with any timed interaction on pickups. So that's why they will always be pressed and they will always be instantaneously picked up for me. Now we have a quantity text. So we want to check, is our quantity less than 2, meaning 1 or 0 should not be possible, but I guess you could just do equal to 1. That's probably a little more sensible here. If quantity is 1, we want to do quantity text. What did I call it? Oh, quantity text. Sorry about that. Quantity text, we want to set visibility to collapsed. This is just something that I thought would make it look a little bit nicer. Why do we need to show quantity times 1 if there's only 1? So I'm just hiding it. And then else, we want to actually set it. So set text. Now, the quantity text is going to, the way I did it, it's going to have like a little X, right? It'll say like, pick up potion X1, or sorry, X2, right? Because 1 wouldn't show. So in order to do that, you need to do ftext format. Now, there's a couple different things you can see here. The format function call always needs a localization format aspect to it. So you may see in some games, you may see a thing that's called lock text, or you may see NS lock text. That just stands for localization text. Localization being, say your game gets really popular and you have people in other countries that want to play it. You need to have a procedure in place for updating text programmatically based on the language. You don't want to have multiple different builds of your game, right? I'm sure we've all seen games where you go in to the menu and you can change the language. That's kind of what this is doing, right? That way it's all contained. You have one build that supports multiple different languages. This lock text stuff is one of the ways, and again, I haven't done this fully. I just know that for now, it's required for format. But theoretically, that's how it would work, is that anything here is going to be displayed to the player. See, all literals will be passed through the localization system. So you need to be able to account for this in case there's other languages. So now NS lock text stands for namespace lock text. If we were just using lock text by itself, we would have to declare a localization namespace up here. Because we're not doing that, we can type it in right here. So this is the interaction widget namespace. We're setting the quantity text. That's kind of, see the key. So we have namespace, key, and now the text. And now the text we want to set is X and then a number. Now the 0 is not the actual number we're setting. The 0 here is a format argument that I'll show you. When you indent this down to the next level, now you can say interactable data quantity. Now what this is doing is this is saying I want to take in argument 0 and use it here. If I had another number here, then I could do something like argument 1, right? So they're 0 indexed. So this 0, anywhere you would write 0 in brackets would pull this quantity. Anywhere you write a 1 would pull the second number. And so it's a little bit weird if you look at other like UE log and stuff, they don't use that. I don't even know if they support it. But for this lock text, you can use that, and it's actually pretty nice and organized. If you're familiar with like C code printf, it's a little bit more like that. Whereas like in C code, you do like %d for an integer or something. That's what it reminds me of. And then we want to say, set our quantity text to visible, because now we verified quantity is not equal to 1. Quantity should not be negative, so it means it should be something greater. I'm going to put this back. I said that it made more sense to put it that way, but I just find it better this way. It soothes my programmer brain more to know that now only cases where this is greater than 2 will ever be applied here, rather than just checking for only 1. Okay, and so that is actually all we need in our interaction widget for right now. I'm trying to think for the test actor here. I guess we could trick it and kind of tell it he's a pickup for now, just to get some text in there, because we're going to use him to make sure it's working. So I guess we'll do that. It's ugly, but we will, when we build up the pickups and everything, we will do plenty more testing. This is just to ensure that we can do an initial check of our code in our widget. So for anything that is going to be interactable, we have to inherit the interface, implement the functions, and then we have to create an instance of the interactable data struct. So I call them instance interactable data. And if you make it a U property, you can expose it to the editor. So edit instance only, category test actor. Now, the interface itself, if we go back to it, it has interactable data. So we need to, in order to get that over to our player character and our widget, we need to be setting this, right? So to do that, we will find the interactable test actors constructor, or actually is begin play. And we will say interactable data, and see it's already found because it's inherited from the interface, equals instance interactable data. This way you come in here, you edit it in the editor, you press play, this is set, and now anytime you aim at this interactable, this data is valid. Okay, so that wraps it up for right now for our interaction widget. We've got main menu, inventory panel. We're not ready for that just yet. We're going to do that next, but first I want to go in. I want to make sure the HUD can build it, is built properly, and we can attach the main menu and test the interactable. Then we will start on the inventory panel widget. So I'm going to go ahead and build and reopen the editor. So I'm back in the editor, and this is my least favorite part about doing UI, is the actual building and tweaking of the interface elements. I like when it's working and making it like update and stuff, but the building part, I don't know, it's kind of finicky. All right, so what we need to do first, we need to go ahead and make blueprints to get the graphical editor for those classes we made. So when you make a widget blueprint, you do not go and find the C++ class like normal. So like if you go in here and say main menu, if you right click this and create a blueprint, this is going to create the wrong kind of blueprint. It's going to create more like like the standard kind of data blueprint with like the event graph and stuff like that. What you need to do, so I'm going to go in here to my games folder, and I'm going to create a new folder and just call it user interface. You right click, go to user interface, and then go to widget blueprint. It's not a blueprint class of the standard kind. Once this pops up, then you can either create a blank one and reparent it later, or you can drop this down and you'll see the different classes that you made. So we want to create a new one that's an interaction widget, and the naming convention for this is WBP interaction widget. Now, if you want to, if you do it this way, if you create one from scratch like this, and you just say user widget, this one will be main menu. What you do to reparent it, you open it up, and then why is my windows aren't going to the... This thing resets regularly, and I don't understand why. Asset editor location, main window. Okay, back to what I was doing. So main menu, you open it, and now if you look in the top right, it's just set to a basic user widget. We want that to be the main menu class that we made. So you go to File, Reparent Blueprint, and then find it. Here's main menu. Now, the naming convention helps us separate them, but if you look, it doesn't differentiate in this list from what's a C++ class and then what's the actual blueprint. So that's one really good reason to put WBP on the front, is because these are the blueprints that you made in the editor, and then this one is the C++ version. And now you can see it's reparented. And now, assuming you have your IDE set up correctly, you just click this and it'll open it up right there in your IDE for you. So now I'm going to compile, save, everything looks good there. What else do we need? We need the HUD. So the HUD is not a widget itself, it's more of the management. So for that, you do want to right click this one and say create blueprint class. So this one will just be called CS tutorial HUD. I'm going to put it under my game folder under blueprints. And then I want to rename that. I guess I did type the wrong name. It should be BP underscore CS tutorial HUD. That one, see, and this is what I was talking about, right? If you call static class, you only get the C++ side. So we've just made the widgets for the main menu and the interaction. That is what goes here. And because it's a T subclass of, you only see the classes that match that type or their children. So we see the C++ one and then the blueprint one. So you want the blueprint one. Do that same thing for both. Obviously, they're not built yet, but this is how they get linked up to the HUD so the HUD can control them. All right, so now we've got that basic stuff done. What we need to do, open the interaction widget, because we're going to start here first. So this is the part where I said it gets a little bit tedious just building it and making it look nice. First off, when I hit compile, you'll see here, this is what I was talking about with the bind widget meta tag. Every single thing here that's an error is because it was required due to these meta tags. So it will not let you use this properly until you create these. And so we're going to do that. Now the first thing we want to add a canvas panel. The easiest way to find elements is to filter this list here. So drag a canvas panel in. The next thing we want is a size box. A size box is just going to make it's going to take whatever you put into it and let you specifically control the size. Now for the widget itself, we can leave it like this. It's going to basically fill the screen regardless. So click on the size box. What I was about to do is go up here to, if you set desired on screen, it will like shrink the entire area of the widget down to what you want. But when it has a canvas panel, it technically fills the screen regardless. So we can just leave it. This is what the canvas panel is going to do. And remember, the canvas panel is not rendered and doesn't really take up any memory or anything. I don't believe, or minimal amount. It's really so for this anchor right here. So this anchor is the position at which the widget elements are going to be relative to on the screen. So what we need to do, click the size box, go up here, click anchors. We want bottom middle. So that'll set it nice and even for you by clicking that. Now you see the widget itself is still way up here. So because now our position on screen is relative to this anchor, you can reset these values back to 0. Now the 0, 0 for any widget is the top left. So you can see that. So an easy way to fix that is to change the alignment. Alignment will position the widget based on its actual, based on like a proportion of its size rather than a pixel value. So if you do a 0.5 on the X, you will always get the direct middle of your widget. Same with the Y. Okay, so 1 is, sometimes it's like, for some reason, negative. Sometimes the signs are flipped, so you might have to do like a negative sometimes. But for this, it's a 1, but I don't want it slammed up on the very bottom of the screen, so I'm going to make it like 1.3, 1.5. Should be fine. Yeah, I mean, if you look at relative to the screen, that's still pretty close to the bottom. So, you know what? I'm going to go with a 2. Sorry, yeah, I'm hitting 1, 2. Okay. So now we've got a nice position for where we want the interaction widget to pop up. And keep in mind, obviously, if you want it somewhere else, feel free to change it. But now we need to edit its size. So this size to content right here will make it so that it's automatically resized, but we don't want that. What we want is to use these minimum and maximum width right here. So basically what this is going to do is it's going to let it shrink or grow based on the content. Otherwise, it's going to always try to be as small as possible based on the content. But since we have strings, which some could be long and some could be short, you know, depending on what you're aiming at, or like an NPC name, we want it to be able to grow. So for our minimum desired width, the width is really the one that we're going to need to tweak. I would say the base size of it should be about 400 pixels. Not 400, like 300. It needs to be pretty wide. It needs to be a little bit wider than what you think, to fit everything and still make it look nice. And once we actually put the text in here in a second, we'll tweak this more. So minimum, I would say, you know, 200, maximum 400, so it can shrink and grow by 100 based on this. The size on the Y, I'm gonna go with 50. Might be a little, 50 is probably good, but see now, because the size changed on the Y-axis, the alignment caused it to change, because now it's moved up by some other proportion. So now I'm gonna drop this back down to 1.5. Max desired height, actually we don't need these because we want it to grow horizontally based on the content, not vertically, unless you choose to make it that way. Okay, so if I compile, I still have all these errors, but you can save it and that'll, you know, keep your layout. So now we need to start filling this in. So the first thing I'm gonna put in, I want a background in this. So if you can't really do that on the size box. It's more of a control element. So one thing I'd like to use that's pretty simple for a background is a border. Drop it on here. So a border can act as a normal border like what it sounds like, but it can also have a just filled background. So I'm gonna take that, change the brush color, just make it like a dark gray, something that text will, white text will show up on pretty good. So that looks good. Now what we need is a horizontal box. Horizontal box is what it sounds like. It organizes elements horizontally. It will, let's see, something has padding. So padding, okay, so if you notice when I drop this in, see this little gap here? Yeah, so this horizontal box came with some padding by default. I'm gonna just type 0 for that. Don't need it quite yet. Now, if you want to have different, like the interior or slightly lighter shade or something, then yeah, give it about, 4 pixels of padding, and then change the border's color, and then, you can do all kinds of stuff with it. I'm gonna leave it this way for now. Okay, and now I'm gonna start putting my text in. So I need name, action, quantity, key press, 4 texts, and a progress bar. So before let's see, horizontal. Okay, so before I start putting the text in, so I want the progress bar to be on the bottom, right? I want it to be able to be distributed cleanly and evenly. So I'm gonna actually take my horizontal box here and wrap it in a vertical. So right click it, go to wrap with, vertical box. This way, now we have our horizontal, which is the thing at the top highlighted. Then I can take a progress bar, drop it in, and now it's on the bottom. Now, obviously the size here is messed up. Let's go ahead and put the text in, and then we'll start tweaking this. So I'm gonna put, so what I did was I dropped the text in here. Now Control C on it, and then Control V, because we need name, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 4 pieces of text. Okay, so obviously they're ridiculously huge. So what you want to do is come in here to the settings on it, go to font. Let's change the size down to something like 16. You can highlight multiples, like holding shift and then clicking, and do that for all of them. Okay. So 16, and you imagine on the screen it's going to be kind of like this. So I think that the widget size does need to be wider. 400. I'll do 450. I'm going to go to the horizontal box now and choose center align horizontally. That's going to move all my text to be evenly distributed in the middle. And let's change this to say something so we can get a better feel for what it's going to look like. So press. I'm going to put another text. So for right now, I'm not going to make it to where the key itself can change, just because that's a little bit still further away than what I'm, I'm not on the point of needing to like change the user interface to show like a gamepad versus a keyboard. So this will just be E, or whatever interaction key you want to put here. Press E. Actually, the E can have E2. This one will be our action text, pick up. And then this will be our interactable name. Okay. Change the size down back to 16 as well. And let's see here. It's looking a little bit ridiculous. It's all slammed up together. But what is the best way to... And this is what I mean when I say it's tedious and annoying. Finding the best way to sort this out, to like make it do what you want, right? I want this to be evenly distributed, but with some space in between it. And I never remember the best ways to do that. Let's see. Press E2. Did I make too many? So this one, here, this will fix it. So this one is going to be key press text, because this is where you change the variable name to make it match. You can also change it right up here. This button is to make it a variable for the blueprint graph, which we're not going to use. E2, that text isn't going to be edited. We can leave that. This one will be action text. Oh, I see what I did. This one's supposed to be the... Okay, here. So you can... This is supposed to be like the quantity or the action. And then this one's name text. If you click this in the horizontal box, it gives you these little arrows here. This will let you reorder it. So just move this one down to the end and rename this one to quantity text. Now when I compile, we're missing the progress bar. So let's just change the name. Interaction progress bar. All right, and there we go. So now we have everything. Now it's just a matter of tweaking this to make it look nice. And here's what the interactable text would look like. So I'm not going to make you guys watch every single little tweak I'm about to do. I'm going to pause for a minute, sort this out, and then I'll talk a little bit about what settings I use to make it work. Okay, so got it looking a little bit nicer. And so here's what I did. I took all the text in here. For the middle three, I gave them a left and a right padding of 3 pixels. For the ends, I only gave them padding for the next to the text, right? It didn't need to be over here on the right. Same with this one. It's got padding on the right. This one's got padding on the left. I then made the horizontal box be fill and gave it a percentage of 0.9. And so what that does is you can tell it how much you want it to fill relative to the other widgets. So then I made the progress bar a fill with a 0.1. Now I wanted to make sure that you still have your center align horizontally, because that'll keep the text in the middle. The vertically, not super crucial, because I mean, either way it's going to be in the middle. I think because I actually took the text themselves and made it center, right? So if you click here, you can actually change where the text is, and you can see it's kind of moving a little bit. So I wanted that one to be centered as well. So made everything centered. I also made the justification on the text centered down here in the details panel. I feel like my size box is a little bit tall, 50. I'm gonna take this back down to 40. And it moved it down a little bit, but that's okay. I think this is looking pretty good now. And you'll notice when I compile, all those errors are gone because I have everything set up. So now let's save it. Also, this always goes undone as well, even though I try to keep this active. Do the 3 dots, go to save on compile on success. It's just better that way. So that way, you know, why wouldn't you want to save it if it compiles successfully? Now the question is, did this guy, yeah. So because if you remember, on the test actor, I gave him his instance interactable data, and then we set it here in his begin play. When I come back in here to the editor, here it is, right? So he's got his mesh, and then here's the instance interactable data. Now, right now, there's nothing this guy really falls into. I mean, normally the suit of armor would just be decoration, right? We're just using it to test everything. I'm going to leave it as a pickup because pickup is the one that we filled out correctly in the interaction widget to set everything. Oh, and you know what? As I realized looking back at this, I forgot to tweak a few things. So we'll do that here in just a second. But I'm going to fill this out, call it armor suit. And remember, the interactable type doesn't really mean anything other than it lets you have some categories you want to customize. So just recognize we are using the pickup enum for something it is not meant for right now. It's going to have a quantity, but that's okay. We want there to be a quantity so we can make sure that it works. The duration and the progress bar, though, that we don't care about that. Not right now. We'll create some classes later on down the line probably that will actually leverage that. But for right now, we're just testing the absolute basics, which is like, does the interaction box pop up and does it get loaded with the text? Okay, so like I said, so the name, you'll notice the name is not being set. I'm handling key press, I'm handling quantity, but I didn't handle action and name. So I'm gonna go ahead and make sure I've saved this. Everything's good. My widget is saved. It's ready to go. These guys we don't need to mess with just yet. All right, so I'm gonna close my editor. And now we do some specific things in the switch statement based on the type. But one thing we want to do no matter what is we always want to set action text to interactable data action. Too many parentheses. Oh, okay. I think it does still need to be casted from a string. Actually, no. It shouldn't. Oh, yeah, duh. I started typing this by habit. You do not need to use ftext from string. The action is already in ftext format. Name text, same thing. Set text, it's going to be the interactable data name. So pretty straightforward. Again, that is the interactable data we will be passing in to the update widget. Because this widget isn't really changing any variables, it's not editing anything, it's only using existing stuff from this struct, it was recommending to me to make the function itself const, and so that's what I did. Const here is saying this interactable data struct cannot be changed. Const here is saying this function in general cannot change variables. It's like a read-only function. Okay, so we got name action, we've got key press, we've got quantity. Those are the four main things we need for a pickup right now. Now, the other thing we need to think about is, where do we actually make this thing show up? So that is going to be in the tutorials character, in the character class. So remember, when I made the HUD here, I made the show and hide interaction widget, and I made the update interaction widget, right? And see now, because the interaction widget has been built up, now we can uncomment this, and that function is there, right? So now what's going to happen is, when the character finds an interactable, we just have to figure out where we're going to call this to pass this data in, and then it will update it in the interaction widget, and it will show it because of this right here, or this one, whichever one you want to use. Looks like I'm getting more recommendations here. I'm assuming, yeah, make these const. Again, no variables are being modified. This is just purely performing actions. When that's the case, it's good practice to make your function const. All it does is like call a function, call another function, or read some data, and as in the case of the update widget right here. Okay, so let's go into our character now, and let's figure out where to put this stuff. So everything's in the HUD. We currently don't have any reference to the HUD in the character. So that's the first thing is that we're gonna have to fix. So I'm just gonna go in here, and it can be protected because only the character really needs to get a reference to it. I'll just go ahead and put it up here at the top. Again, it's purely internal. I don't really need to set it visible anywhere or anything like that. It's called ACS tutorial HUD. Need to forward declare it. So again, that puts it up here outside the class definition. And I'm just going to call it HUD. Okay. Now, how do we actually load that up? That will happen here in the begin play. So right here in begin play, we want to say HUD equals cast. We're going to cast it to the CS tutorial HUD. And what are we going to cast? We're going to cast the result of this function, get world, get first player controller, get HUD. Now, because we have a game mode where we are going to load in the HUD reference blueprint, it will link all this up. It's just, the path to how it knows to get the right one is a little bit still beyond me. I believe it goes through the game mode blueprint, which I'm going to edit here in just a few. So now we have this reference, right? And if you look, did it automatically add an include for me? It did. Okay, I don't like that, but so actually, I don't know. Did I put this in here myself before? Can't remember. All right, I'm putting this up here in the game includes. Okay, so now if you look and we go to access the HUD pointer, we have update interaction widget. So this is what we need. But where are we going to call it? Well, the found interactable. See, I left this placeholder comment from before. So this is the perfect place, and what you will do is you will say HUD update interaction widget, and now it needs its interactable data, right? So we have our TScript interface that's holding the reference to whatever interactable we're looking at. So that we just pass in target interactable data. But remember, it's passing it in by reference, so add an ampersand on the front. So there we go. So now, when we find an interactable, this should display the widget on screen and update it simultaneously because of this functionality right here. Now, the only difference is if you don't do this, because obviously, this is the same exact thing that show interaction widget is doing, then all you would do is just make a call to show interaction widget immediately after, because that way it gets the data and then it updates. I just thought, like I said before, if you're updating it, why not show it, because it means you found something new. So now, what happens when you look away and we want to hide it? Well, I left another placeholder comment. At this point, we would call HUD hide interaction widget. We're already nulling out all the interaction stuff here. We're hiding the widget. It doesn't need to be nulled out, because you should be setting it to using the data to refresh it and set it every single time that you find something new. So that's what we want. And because we have the one single widget, it works perfectly, right? Even if you were looking at something else, you look at a pickup, it should only enter our pickup set here, and then set based on the new interaction data, and everything should look good. So that is all we need, and it's time to actually test it out and make sure that it works well. So I'm going to go ahead and do a build and go back into the editor. Alright, so I'm back in the editor, making sure my widget looks good. It does. Now we need to make sure that our game mode is updated to have everything. So I put it under the Blueprints framework folder. So let's go in here, and now this is what I was talking about. So we have our character, and HUD class is set to just a default HUD. We need it set to our CS tutorial HUD. And again, there's the C++ version, there's the Blueprint. That's the one that we made earlier. Select that one. Now this should allow for the hierarchy, so that it knows, the player controller for this is this default player controller class, but it is associated with this HUD. I believe that's how you can make those calls to get first player controller get HUD. Okay, so now that should be good. I'm going to close it. I'm going to go back into the HUD blueprint and make sure that these classes are still set. Main menu is not doing anything for now, of course, but our interaction widget should be good to go if it's set. I think it's time to test it out. Make sure this dude still has his info. It is. He's a pickup. Let's try it. When I aim at him, look at that. To examine armor suit, and he's got a quantity of 3. Now when I look away, it didn't work right. See, I thought my call to hide it should have hidden it already. So what did I do? Did I typo? I think I typed show, didn't I? No? Hide if interaction widget. Oh, see, here it is. Here's the bug. Copy pasted and forgot to change this back to collapsed. Collapsed. So when you are changing something like this that's purely internal to a function, you're not changing a header, you're not changing a constructor. Those are the really dangerous areas to change and try to do live coding. As long as you're not doing that, it should be safe to go ahead and compile this. The button right here is way down at the bottom for UE5. I'm going to hit that. All right, so it was successful. Now let's try it. We aim at him, we look away, and there you go. And remember, because we implemented all the interaction functions on the guy, you still get those printouts in the log to show that our interaction is actually working. All right, so this is some really good progress. I know that it's kind of painful to make these widgets like this, but we're slowly inching forward. All right, so let's go ahead and just the last thing we'll do here, wrap this up by building our inventory panel widget. That way it's all ready to go and we can move into the next section focusing on the inventory code. So for my base class, I'm going to use inventory panel, which has nothing in it right now, but that's okay. WBP inventory panel. I'm going to open this guy up. Okay. So for an inventory panel, the way I'm implementing the inventory right now is it's just a pure array. It's not going to be a slot-based inventory where you, well, it's got a class we're going to create called an item slot, but it doesn't stick into a slot. You can't build, you can't just drag things around to whatever spot on the inventory. It's going to essentially resize itself for you, and you can still drag each individual item, but you can't say like, okay, I want to drag this item down to the bottom right slot. So I didn't implement it that way. It wouldn't be too difficult to take what I have and make that, but we're not going to do that for now. I'm just keeping it really basic. So it's just going to basically show you the contents of an array, but it's going to show it to you in item, in our item form. So the reason I brought that up is because we're going to use what's called a wrap box. Okay. But first we need to go ahead and build this guy up. So the size box is going to be the base for this one. Now, last time we started with a canvas panel when we made the interaction widget, because the interaction widget needs to, for one, be displayed by itself, and it needs to be at an arbitrary place on the screen. The inventory panel is going to be attached to the main menu, so we will actually drag it in and place it based on that one. So for that, you're going to go to desired on screen. And now we can come back to our size box here. And we can check this width and height override. I'm going to make it like a width of like 400 and a height of 600. And again, we can tweak this pretty easily once we drag it into the other. You know what? We might be able to do it right now. So go to the content browser, user interface, main menu. Now, when you, put a canvas panel on it. That's all it needs, right? And this is going to be the screen size right now. So when you create another widget, you can use user created widgets in other user created widgets. So to do that, there's a category right here, user created. So we can drag our inventory panel in. And this already, since all we made is the size box, but this gives you an idea of what it's going to look like on the screen, right? So I think I want to make it a tiny bit wider. I'll make it 450 by 600. No, let's go 500. It's a nice square that way. And then look, right when I flip back over, it should already have its size. Okay, no. See, it's got this 400 by 600 with these arrows over here. Interesting. I'm not sure why it does that. Let me delete it and try dragging in a fresh one. Yeah. I guess it just allows you to, even if you make it a certain size and you want it to only be that size, I guess it still does let you customize it over here. So you have your size X and Y. Just make sure that those match what you've put over here in your overrides. Okay, and now we're familiar with this anchors widget. So for our anchors, I'm going to anchor this one to the right middle of the screen. I'm going to clear out my position and I'm going to use alignment again. I want it to be centered. So 0.5 on the Y. For the X, is this one going to be negative? Nope. Positive again. 1.5. So half of its width in. That looks pretty good. Now later, once we bind up the stuff to show the menu, that is where it'll appear every time. And even if you resize the editor and make it bigger or smaller, it will always appear relative to this position by 50% of its size inward like that. So it might be a little bit closer to the edge of the screen. Oops, wrong one. Not the Y. 1.3. I like that. That way your character's still in the middle. You have plenty because while the inventory is open, you can still interact. So this way, it's not covering your character, and it's still right there, easily accessible. Okay, so now what do we need to do? So again, I'm going to put a border just to fill it in with a color. I want it to match my interaction widget. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go to the color, copy paste my hex linear value, and set it here. You can set it to whatever you want. I just want to make it consistent. Now we need a vertical box. And inside the vertical box, we're going to have a text, a wrap box. That's the one I was talking about that actually is going to store the inventory contents. And then at the bottom, a horizontal box. This horizontal box is going to hold the quantity and the capacity info. So the wrap box, come in here, set this to fill, and then leave it. We can put it at 0.9. We might edit the other ones to use fill. Inside the horizontal box, I'm gonna copy paste this text. I'm gonna put 2 text blocks. And see, you can see it forming already now. Player inventory. I'm gonna center this. I'm gonna also center it here. So if you change justification, you can leave it as wide to fill the whole bar. I'm gonna leave it like that. For these, I'm gonna give this horizontal box a little bit of vertical padding, like 5 pixels. Oh, and it looks like my size box. What was it? Did the border have padding? No. The vertical box had some padding. Clear this out if you don't want it to be there. I don't really need it to be. Although I say that, it does look a little bit nicer if it's not slammed up on the edge. So how about we'll put a little bit of padding around the border. Oh no, that's a mistake, because the border should fill everything, right? So the vertical box should have it. So I'll just make it consistent though. Something like, 5 pixels the entire way around. That way, you have a little bit of a buffer here for the text. Okay, so now this one is going to be weight capacity. And this one is going to be, let's see, no, this one will be inventory weight. And then this one will be inventory capacity. These are just labels for now. We need to change this down quite a bit more. I use 16. I think I'm gonna make it more like 18. I'll leave this one at 24 because it's like a heading. Now this is just gonna say, weight X out of whatever, capacity X out of whatever. Now we don't want this, I don't want this slammed up against each other like that. So you can put padding, but another useful little tool I like to use, it's called a spacer widget. Doesn't do anything except give space, give padding. So it really is kind of doing the same thing, but I don't know. I guess I'm just showing it because it's another alternative. So my size on it, right here you have an X and a Y. I'm gonna make it 10 pixels on the X, more like, let's do 20. All right, so that is a very basic, very ugly inventory, but that is going to serve our purposes for, linking it up to the code and making it work. So feel free to tweak this to whatever you want. You can even, add images to this. There's an image widget element here. You put it on the background of something. You can make, custom UI graphics and all that stuff, but change the colors. You can load in fonts. If you go to import, I think you can import a font directly. If you go to import here, you can find like fonts. I don't know if I have any, but anyway, don't think that you have to settle for the ugly default Roboto font. It is entirely way too overused in all Unreal Engine projects. So if you can, I would say change this. You would be surprised at how much nicer it makes it feel if you do nothing but give yourself a more unique font. So just a few things to keep in mind. I think that wraps up the basic widget creation for the moment. If you look in our main menu, this is what you can expect to see when we pull up the menu. So it's finally time to start on some inventory code.